We'll talk about Streamlining Success today, or actually how we built a framework for building SDKs at our company that showed us a lot of success in terms of emerging technologies, building something new for our customers, and just in general, breaching new markets.
Yeah, so who are we? Well, I'm Nash. I'm a member of the developer relations team at Stream, and I'm joined by Filip, our Android UI team lead.
Yeah, the things that we'll talk about today are kind of different, but also connected in the grand scheme of things in building products. We'll talk about the idea of Stream, or how we started building our product, our company. What were some of the initial ideas and how we used those ideas to pivot into other products that helped us expand our market base and user base and just in general build new things at the company. So one of the things we'll also touch upon is development in startups. Not everyone worked in startups before, or if you're thinking about heading into startups, it's a very different approach than agency work or just kind of building your own product within a huge corporation that has set in stone systems. We'll talk about trailblazing with Compose, how we use the Compose framework or the Jetpack Compose framework and technology, something that was new and emerging last year, to build something at our company that helped us then trailblaze these frameworks, build something that's reusable, and finally build new products. And we can see some of the results from these products at the very end of the presentation. So yeah, let's start with the idea of Stream.
So with any company and with any SDK, the question is always, what is the problem we are trying to solve? And to answer that, we need to time travel a little bit, back to 2013, when skeuomorphic design was all the rage and Facebook was growing in popularity. But also during this time, there was a boom of what we call socially aware applications. Essentially, these are applications where people want to connect with each other, follow people, be notified when something changes. If Filip has a life update and wants to share it, keep informed with people. And the thing is, building these socially aware applications are really difficult because there's a lot of updates going on. I mean, there's the obvious notification feeds, but then if someone interacts with that post or if someone comments on that post, you have all of that data flowing through. So building these in-house was just notoriously difficult and not a great experience for the development team building them, and even less of an experience for the users using them while it was constantly crashing. So yeah, our co-founders decided to build an SDK to basically abstract these difficulties and make it very easy for people to build these types of applications without having to do the groundwork themselves. And that's basically how our first product, or SDK, Activity Feeds, was born. But what are feeds? The name sounds really abstract, right? Well, you can really think of it as a list of activities. So it can be anything, but the most common use case is basically some type of user-generated content. So in this example, we have an Instagram-like application, which our team built as a guide and a use case to kind of show how you can use the API. And it's essentially a list of updates that a user can subscribe to and be notified whenever something changes. So again, you have the typical timeline application of activities, and then you have the secondary features like likes, comments, shares, etc. And yeah, so with these activities, again, you can do all the things that you'd expect in a social application. So you can do ranking, personalization, etc. And again, we do the heavy lifting. So when someone posts an update to these feeds, the followers are automatically notified. So those activities are fanned out across our entire network, and you don't have to build and support that in your SDK and in your infrastructure yourself. And having many types of content means that you probably have multiple feeds. So again, the timeline, notification, comments, etc. Managing all of them can be very difficult individually. So we made sure to build in controls or groups that allow you to control them as a single unit and apply broad permissions without having to configure them manually.
Yeah, to kind of sum it up, feeds are basically how Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or any other social aware app works. And our SDK was there so you could build such applications yourself. Instead of building everything yourself, again, in-house, it can take a lot of time, a lot of money, a huge team as well. And then you have all the costs of maintenance. And instead of doing all of this yourself, you can actually use our SDK. And some of the problems that we solved fall into these two groups. As I mentioned, complexity of feeds in general. You have tons of types of content. You might want to build different applications as well. So, for example, if you build something like Facebook initially, and then you want to start a marketplace app, or something similar like a dating app or, I don't know, something else. All of these applications are the same at core. You present some content to the user and the user consumes it, but the actual application is very, very different. So it's really hard to build them in a way that you can reuse the code, maybe reuse the logic, the business stuff under the hood, but it's also very hard to scale them. So imagine, you build a small social media application that you just want to use within your friends, and then this scales to billions of users. How do you actually pay for that? How do you think about that ahead of time? How do you build a system that supports this if you only thought that you're going to use this application with just a couple of friends? So it's really hard to do this, and that's where we come in. We can just scale everything for you. We have the infrastructure. We have the code ready. The teams have built a good backend solution, and you don't really have to worry about any of this.
Yeah, and like Filip mentioned, performance is just kind of one aspect. It's one of the most important aspects. But the other side to this is the infrastructure not only has to be fast, but it also has to be secure, because you're dealing with user information, and it doesn't always have to be a social vertical. It can be another type of vertical. So it's really important that we build in those security controls and privacy into the infrastructure and into the API directly, so we're compliant with all of the different privacy protections and ISO standards. And despite all the challenges, we actually did manage to ship and get our first SDK out, which was awesome. But naturally, as engineers, the question always comes up. It's like, great, I finished one project. What can we do next? And again, with developers, it's you ship an SDK, and people always use it in ways that you never intended. So basically, we had to look directly at how at some of our activity feeds use cases to see that people were using our real-time infrastructure for chat. And obviously, that's not what we intended. So we kind of thought to ourselves, and we were like, all right, how can we optimize this for chat, and how can we improve the developer experience here? So that's basically how we ended up with Stream Chat. So we decided, like, all right, let's optimize this, and let's stay true to our principles. Let's provide an out-of-the-box solution with UI components and a powerful backend that people can integrate into their application and easily add chat, use our messaging system without having to build and integrate this for themselves each time. And of course, being an SDK, we knew we needed to support every major platform. So whether you were building on web with like React or Angular, mobile with Compose and iOS, or even gaming SDKs like Unity, we wanted to make sure that we provided an SDK with a great developer experience to meet developers where they were.
And when we say we built all of these things, this is, again, very abstract. So let me just kind of do a rundown of what we support currently. We have all of these UI components. We have beautiful UI SDKs. We have a great backend solution. But everything is also event-driven, obviously, because in chat, you have a lot of events. You have a lot of communication going on. You have a lot of updates. And in our case, all of the UI is updated in real time based on these events. And not only that, but you can also provide your custom handlers for events. So you can, make sure that you can support custom use cases. If someone leaves a reaction, you might want to start an animation, which is a very common use case. If you upload an attachment, you might want to notify users, and so on and so forth. And with these events being in question, there's also the question of offline persistence and synchronization, caching, retry logic, so on and so forth. We have a solution for you in place again, where you don't need to think about anything that's stored locally. In fact, everything is done for you. So if you want to cache messages locally before you send them, if you have a spotty connection or you're just kind of offline in a weird part of the world where there's no internet, I guess, which is actually a huge part of the world, you can queue these messages, and then once you go online, all of these messages will be sent, synchronized with the backend, and you'll have a clean history. And with any chat use case, push notifications are key. Again, similar to how events work, push notifications are there for you to update the UI, to react to them, and start some custom experience as well. And you can provide different types of providers for notifications if you want, something custom, but you can also use our Firebase, Xiaomi, and Huawei providers as well.
And of course, in addition to the features that Filip mentioned, we also wanted to provide a rich set of UI components that people could just very quickly drop into their application and go from idea to prototype very quickly. So that means providing performant lists. So we take care of all the list processing for all the messages coming in, attachment handling, threads and replies, etc. But again, being a developer product, we needed to make sure that designers and developers could very quickly customize these components to really fit the needs and looks of each brand. Because again, we don't want to provide something and then have a bunch of applications all looking and feeling the same. So that level of customizability needed to also be included.
Oh, sorry. This is you.
Yeah, so I think we clicked through one slide early there. But yeah, the front end is only part of the story. So to really like make the application your own, you obviously need to have some type of backend integration going. And yeah, so we also made sure to provide backend SDKs to all of the popular languages that you can see there. So whether you're connecting something like Firebase Auth, as Filip mentioned, or a bespoke API, we made sure that our backend clients was also very similar to our front-end clients in that you could very quickly integrate something with them, and it's all fully event-driven, so you could also listen in to the WebSockets and react to those messages or even pipe data into the chat as needed.
Okay, so in terms of the backend infrastructure, we were able to scale to millions of users for you. In fact, I think up to 5 million of users communicating in a single chat at the same time, which is enough to cover all of the major use cases. We were very reliable and have SLA 99 point all of that availability, which means that in your really important moments, such as app launches, getting a huge influx of users because of a marketing campaign or something similar, we'll make sure that the API, the backend, is not going to fall down. It's not going to let you down or disappoint you in any way. We'll be there for you to support all of your use cases. And all of these requests, all of this data transfer is very fast. We have a 5 millisecond average response time, so super low latency, and you don't have to worry about any of the requests not being in real time. And because there's a lot of content going on, a lot of messages being shared, a lot of data being sent, as well as images, different types of attachments, we have unlimited message storage for you. And also a CDN which lets you store data such as more complex data such as files and images. And if you don't want to use that for some reason, if you want to apply extra processing, which we also do kind of support on our CDN, you can provide a custom CDN which handles all of these use cases for you. So yeah, our backend is kind of magic. It's really nicely built, and it takes care of absolutely everything for you. So you don't have to worry about building all of these things yourself. You can just plug in our components, plug in our SDK, and you have everything sorted.
And the technical stuff aside, we also made sure that we built in, again, privacy controls, security compliances, etc., to make sure that one, our backend is not only performant from a technical perspective, but it also can scale and work across industries. So whether you're in healthcare and looking for HIPAA, or you're just building a casual application, we made sure that your data is protected and secured on our infrastructure. So with all of these cool features and compliances and all of that, you might be thinking this has to be really expensive, right? And our answer to that is no. We started out as an open source project, and we always want to encourage and give back to our community. So we have a 30-day free trial that has all the stuff that you'd expect, so no credit card, full feature access, etc. But we also have a maker account, which is for developers, small companies, and it's free indefinitely. It does not require, it doesn't have any surprise overages or anything, so you're not going to wake up one morning to a very lengthy or large bill from Stream if you go over. And if anyone is interested, the requirements is off to the side.
Okay, so let's go back to development in startups. Let's kind of stop all this marketing stuff about the company and actually talk about something concrete. So there's this common meme that startups are full of crunch, that you work 70, 80 hours a week, which is obviously not always true, and not true in general, I guess, hopefully. But there is a reason why startups need to move very fast, and that reason is because you can't plan things ahead of time. So imagine, in our case, we're building UI SDKs, UI frameworks that let you build social media apps, let you build chat features. We can't really predict if there's going to be a new technology out there. So Compose was one of the things that just kind of came by. In Android, it was new. Swift UI was kind of similar. So if you want to have the most experience, the most impact in the community, let's say, or in the market, you kind of want to start as early as possible. Some of the really good examples that are kind of now running around are Kotlin multi-platform mobile and all of those things, because you want to explore that as soon as possible. And in tech, things move very fast, and you just kind of want to jump on the train as soon as possible, so you don't miss out on things.
Yeah, and the thing about building an SDK, unlike a client application, is that products expand over time, but with an SDK, it's really easy to add stuff in, but changing them later could become a very big problem because now these are public-facing APIs. If you change those APIs, you're going to break user products. So it's, again, very easy to add stuff in, but to take stuff out is always really painful. But in the times where we do make this mistake, it's really important for us to sit down and kind of do a postmortem and kind of see what went wrong and how to avoid repeating them in the future.
Yeah, so again, it's one thing to develop things in a startup, but it's also the SDK development aspect. So if you're developing SDKs or you're curious about how it works, one of the main things about SDKs or libraries is that you have to be careful about those breaking changes. So again, UI SDK, we ship some default UI, some default UX, how things behave, for example, how reactions behave in an app, in our SDK. Imagine, similar to what Adam mentioned in his talk previously, imagine if you change the UX of how reactions work. All of the users that are end users of these SDKs will be affected and might not be affected in a positive way. Even if it's an improvement to something that you've already built, if it's an improvement to the feature, extra functionality, it can be annoying to users, and users don't really like change. And it's really hard to build that trust with them if you do change things a lot. So try to apply good deprecation processes. So in our case, we have even several months of deprecation timelines for really large changes, and for smaller ones, it's about a month or two. So it's really good to do that because then your customers will know how to apply the new changes that they need based on what you've done in the API, but also how to integrate new features if there's something really exciting that you're building. One thing that's really helpful with SDKs in general is having a lot of public apps, a lot of examples, a lot of open source things, because users can take a look at that and see what's going on. So if you build an Instagram clone, in our case, it can show users that you're able to build that. But if you just kind of hide it in the API, you allow this functionality but not really show it anywhere, they're not going to know that it exists.
So what did we realize from our early days of building SDKs? Well, we started our chat product with just a few things: a backend implementation, a React implementation, and a couple native solutions. We didn't kick off everything at once because we didn't really know what the customer base for this was going to be, or if this was something that's going to pay out in the long run or not. That said, the one thing that we really realized early on is that we needed a system to build and scale these new products based on the experience we gained from that point. In the end, we really had to ask ourselves, how can we make sure that our future SDKs are consistently solid?
Yeah, and this is where Compose came in. So we had, 4, 5, 6 SDKs at the time when we were building Compose. And because it was a new technology, it gave us this new perspective of approaching new projects. We had a very simple set of guidelines for Compose. We wanted to build everything from scratch with Compose for Compose, so that it's intuitive enough for users who are familiar with the technology, but also that it has everything ready for them in terms of customization, in terms of flexibility, because we knew Compose could go just the extra mile that some of the other SDKs couldn't. So we took a look at what our SDKs already ship, already enable for our users, and we took all the best features and kind of put it in Compose. We crammed it together, similar to how Kotlin stole all the great features from other languages. Oh, sorry. And one of the last things that we did was we provided a full tutorial, because every SDK needs a good tutorial, a good set of documentation, a good set of sample apps, because it's a nice way to showcase, again, what the technology can do, what are some of the features that you support, and what are some of the ways you can customize or change the behavior to match your use cases.
Yeah, with Compose, we wanted to do something different. It just opened up new areas of customization, performance, and personalization, unlike our other SDKs, maybe unlike Flutter. But at the same time, we wanted to ship an MVP, iterate, improve, and just start to get feedback. Because for us, that user satisfaction is the principal thing when building these libraries. And at the time, Compose was not something many people were familiar with, because when we started developing with Compose, it was still in alpha. Yeah. There wasn't a bunch of guys. There wasn't an API spec or a reference that we can use. So basically, we were having people test internally, give feedback, iterating, and then just kind of hope that when we ship this to the community, it's something and it's an approach that people would enjoy using.
Yeah, so the timeline that we had for Compose was very optimistic, let's say. We wanted to spend the first few weeks iterating, focusing on reusability, theming, customization, and then within the next couple of months, build an MVP SDK. That would give us the rest of the year. So we kind of started in June 2021, as I mentioned here on the slide, but that would give us like 4 or 5 months to build something that's much more concrete, that is going to meet Compose 1.0 or like a stable release of Compose at the end of the year. We thought it's going to happen at the end of the year because we didn't really know what the timeline is. We had some alpha releases early 2021. We had some betas. We weren't sure if there's going to be a beta 10 or beta 20 or something before a 1.0 stable or RC comes in. And this is kind of where life comes in and life happens. So as you can see, Compose 1.0 was announced to be released in July 2021. It actually happened at the very end of July, which gave us only a couple of months, a bit less than a couple of months to build up an SDK and ship with Compose. Again, because we are a startup, we want to say, okay, we have this thing which focuses on Compose. We're one of the first people out there who are using it, and we need your feedback. So this was a bad thing and a good thing, let's say. We had to do some changes to accommodate to this new timeline, but we also had the ability to use the rest of the year for feedback and polishing from our customers, and of course to make it feature complete with the other SDKs.
Yeah, so in the end, we were able to ship Compose on day one of it being stable. But again, as you could probably guess from that shrunken timeline, yeah, there were some things that we just simply weren't able to build in that initial release. So we were able to provide lots of customization options, detailed documentation, and information about the project all on our GitHub and available for users to inspect, contribute, get back to us if we built a good API or not. But yeah, that said, with the timeline changes, there were some things that we had to pivot in our approach.
And one of the first things is avoiding building too many features. We had an extensive set of features. We had a huge feature matrix, as we call it, across our SDKs, which tells us what each SDK can do. Obviously, web SDKs might not need persistence as mobile do, but web SDKs might need some other feature as compared to mobile. Yeah. So we wanted to focus on the very fundamental stuff, all the core stuff that our users need, something that's very common for them to see and use, instead of building some things that might not work or are kind of half there and are just not guided by user feedback. We kind of cut down on the customization aspect, and not in the sense that we can't customize things in our SDK, or at least couldn't at the time, but more in the sense that our XML SDK, so existing Android XML UI toolkit, had hundreds of attributes, different ways of customizing things, hundreds of handlers as well for different types of reactions, attachments, uploading states, so on and so forth. So we kind of cut down on this because we didn't know what our Compose customers will need, but we've again focused on some of the fundamental things. And instead of shipping a ton of stuff that could potentially be overhead because our users don't need it, we wanted to build guides and examples instead. So we had a lot of guides which showed you how to build a custom attachment factory, or just in general to build custom attachments, how to implement custom handlers, handle events, so on and so forth. And this was a really good approach, because if you give the customer the ability to build something without necessarily shipping it directly in the SDK amongst other variants or alternatives, you're not adding overhead to the SDK, which is really important when you want to add a library to an app and reduce the app size. And the last thing is ramping up development. We wanted to hire more Compose people. Again, it would probably be really hard because not too many people were using Compose at the time. But we went in a different direction. We had our XML developers work on Compose and learn Compose, and vice versa. Compose developers were using XML and just kind of observing what's going on. In this way, we could benefit both of the SDKs, because we pulled some things from XML structure and just in the way that XML works into Compose to improve it. And similarly, we started building some of the XML components in a Compose way, with slot APIs and different kinds of ways to customize it. And generally, both sets of team members were able to work on both of the SDKs, which helped us be more flexible in the future.
So again, we were able to release the SDK, but as you might have guessed from that ambitious timeline, we were just getting started. We wanted to see what else we could include in here to really take that experience to the next level. But yeah, it was really cool because customers started signing up. We got some chat trial signups, people testing it out, giving us their feedback, etc. But the question still remained, how do we replicate this approach for some of the other platforms that we have coming up? And that kind of brings us to frameworking SDKs. So shortly after the release of our Compose SDK, the team started looking at like creative development frameworks and patterns that we can use and adopt across other platforms. And with frameworks, you usually have a set of rules or principles that you apply whenever you're using a framework. So that's exactly what we set out to do. We set out to define like, okay, what's going to be our core product philosophy here? Like, what are the top 5 things we're going to focus on when we build these new SDKs? And number one, it just had to be putting developers first with a fun and intuitive API. Next was focusing on people. Like build something that people want. So go out, talk to people, actively pursue feedback and improvements, and just learn what their pain points are and how we can take the first step to help them.
Yeah, I'm not too great at talking to people, but we still managed to pull it off. With that in mind, again, going back to the extensive set of features, we did want to build some of the core stuff, some of the fundamental things, but not expand too much. Again, if customers expect something or customers see something in an SDK, in a library, they expect it to work. So if it doesn't, then it's a huge pain point and it might actually steer them away from your product. And that goes in line with the timeline. So we had to be very lean with the timeline. We had a couple of months for the Compose SDK, the initial version. And we figured that that's enough time to build something, to build a new product. If we dedicate enough effort to the planning, to the organization, and we knew the exact things that we needed to build. And finally, as I mentioned, we used this new SDK to align with other SDKs, other products that we had within the company. So in general, when you kind of look at this product philosophy, this is something that you can apply even to your applications, to your code bases, to internal libraries that you might use. You want to always make sure that the developer experience is great. If someone is using your product, that they know how it works. That includes documentation, all of different things like guides. You want to focus on like the people aspect. So if you see that someone is struggling with a part of your API or a part of your SDK, then it's obviously a problem. You need to resolve it. And it might also be a reason because you might be building too many things that no one actually needs. So to cut out all of those things and kind of polish them, you will be able to build them in a shorter timeline, in a nicer time frame. And you will be able to use all the core things that you build to, again, improve your other products in the future.
Yeah, and since the primary users of our SDKs or developers, we wanted to make sure that we gave them a really good and unforgettable experience in a great way. So we focused heavily on writing extensive documentation for the code. So not just guides on our website, but also like proper code documentation. So you don't have to leave the IDE and do the whole like context switching just to look up what a method is doing. We also created, as Filip said, like guides for common use cases. So we didn't want to maintain a bunch of sample apps and just have a bunch of bloat everywhere. So we focused on creating guides for just integrations, examples, etc., where it made sense. And of course, the most important thing is we strive to have a clear and consistent API. Because again, as we're building for Android, if a company, for example, decides to use us and they're integrating in React, we want to make sure that we make that experience for them as seamless as possible. So yes, we want to respect platform idioms, but we also want to make sure that our public-facing APIs, even across SDKs, are consistent and you can transfer knowledge easily between different projects at the same company.
And focusing back on people, we don't really mean that it's, we're just focusing on a specific persona or something in that manner, which you usually have with user research. We're actually looking into accessibility of reaching us and just kind of communicating with us. We have several different ways you can communicate with us through emailing lists on our website and just, general support channels, either through Zendesk or GitHub issues. But we also have support rotations. Some people don't like these, and just in general, it might be a tough sell. But having engineers, like 1 or 2 people, every single week on support that are communicating directly with customers is really, really good, because you can resolve all of the issues that you might, find yourself in the future, a couple of months from now, much faster if you just get that report from a customer. And again, happy customers means that the company is doing great, you can expand your product, and you can always pivot into new things because you have an existing, trusting customer base. And some of the things that we also offer to some of our enterprise customers in general is direct integration meetings with our engineers, Slack communication. So if you're looking for the best or like the easiest way to integrate a specific use case, you can describe that use case to us, and we'll just give you the steps to reproduce it. And one of the things that I'm kind of most happy about is that all of our planning, at least for Android and some other projects, I think, is done on GitHub. So it's not in Jira. I personally hate Jira a lot, or at least I don't like using it. So it's in GitHub. It's directly accessible through our organization. So if you open our GitHub project, it's not just issues that you can see. It's also all the planning as well. So you can see things like sprints. You kind of can see here like who's working on a specific issue, what's the progress, or like what's the current status of the ticket. You can see the overview of the entire project, what kind of tasks you're planning for the next quarter, and so on and so forth. So again, this is something that you could also apply to your product, even if it's not a specific SDK that you're building a library. It might be an open source app. It's really nice to see what's going on, especially as a customer who opened an issue, as you can follow the entire path and life cycle of each ticket.
Yeah, so when it comes to going back to the feature set, when it comes to defining those, there's a few considerations that we needed to have. The most important thing is, again, to be on par with the timeline, because we did want to get this out as soon as possible. And as much as we as developers love building and adding features to our SDKs and our apps, we really had to limit how much of this we included to basically include the most impactful features. So essentially, we had to kind of ask ourselves, what really makes a great SDK? What are some of the features that our users care the most about? And we went around asking this, we reached out to stakeholders to basically gather a list of like our core requirements that we were planning to build on. And in the end, we prioritize shipping a small set of features that is very stable, and then iterating on that, improving it, adding features after the fact. Again, because people rely on these end SDKs in their applications, we want to make sure that we ship something that's stable. So we would rather get something out there that is minimal in feature set, and then we'll add it in later, versus releasing one large bloated SDK with a lot of like flashy features, but don't really work in the end.
Yeah, and again, going back to the timeline, as much as I hate to say it, we have to be as agile as possible. So we need to be able to pivot, because we are building an end user product. We are building something that someone else will use, that will then reach other customers or other users. And it's much easier to pivot very early on in your design. We actually did this with Compose, because we were building an API, and as Nash mentioned, it was in early alpha, early beta, and there weren't too many specifications on how you should build Compose, or at least what are the best practices for Compose. So we had to figure them out ourselves. And we did build an initial API. It was really good, I would say, but we did receive some feedback from the customers that made us pivot into a different direction. And then, again, it's very easy to do it in an early version than it is after you've released something that's stable, quote unquote, and then you have to make a breaking change in a major release. And one thing which is very weird is that if you add the beta flag or beta tag to your SDKs, your libraries, something that I think Google does a lot, no one really complains. You're kind of accustomed to this feeling of, okay, this is not completely done. This is still in its initial phases. This is being polished. So it's really good, not in that sense that you don't have to worry about breaking things, but more in the sense that customers are more likely to approach you to tell you, okay, we see that this is not fully done. If you want to hear something from us, here are some of the ideas that we have. And we've had a lot of ideas from our customers on Compose, at least.
So with that in mind, it was very important for us to align everyone, because we're all excited to go off and build these things, but we need to make sure that we build something that, again, is consistent, right? So one of the things that we realize is it's easier for us to scale a well-established process than to run multiple variations at once. Because the one thing that you do not want to have is have all of your teams working in a silo, and then you all come out at the end of the day and it's like, oh, he has something completely different to me. So That's never a great experience. So with any cross-functional effort, it's important that we align everyone and get everyone on the same page. And for us, that just meant adding, a weekly alignment meeting, and we try to keep our engineers away from meetings as much as possible. So it meant Filip and I sitting down every Monday and going over some of the stuff like feature and parity, naming and semantics, testing and stability, etc. And again, like the goal here is to make sure that everyone internally is on the same page about what is going on across all of the different technology stacks. So we ship something that is great and that is, consistent externally.
One of the great things that we managed to do here is, even though we had like a few more meetings, we managed to delegate them. So a certain team member or a certain part of the team was handling testing and in general stability of the SDK, and they were driving that initiative and effort. Another member was driving new features and initiatives by building it in a single SDK and then scaling it to others, like replicating that behavior. Because if you launch like a new feature on 5 different SDKs or projects, you're not sure if it's going to work out. It's much better to kind of build it in a single, smaller environment, see if it works, make a POC, and then see if the customers want it or, in general, if the product side of the company want to go with this feature. So, yeah, we did add a few more meetings, how developers like them. But it did give us some really, really, really good results because we were able to align on different things. We were able to fix features which were misaligned for, kind of sad to say this, but for like a year or two because the SDKs were not built at the same time. And the documentation or just the general information about how a feature should work wasn't present. So, yeah. We had we had some really good results, and again, I just kind of wanted to highlight how this alignment is really, really important because you can't. One of the things that I learned very recently is that you can't scale a person or a team as much as you can scale a process. And as soon as you solve this problem of scaling a process, you can apply it to multiple different projects and multiple teams across the board.
So you're a fan of the extra meeting that we added to your calendar then?
Yeah, not really.
Okay, that's good feedback. So now that we've went over all of this, what is the results that we have to really show for it? Well, I think the really interesting one for us internally is the time it takes for us to develop one of these SDKs basically cut in half. So get everyone working together, get everyone out of silos, and take the knowledge that we learned in one process, apply it to another one. And yeah, the time it took to just get something out there and start getting feedback on was reduced significantly. The adoption rate was also growing quite rapidly. The adoption rate was essentially twice as fast as some of our older SDKs, and that was really good for us, again, good for us to see and reflected in the fact that 10% of our customers already started migrating to Compose in some of our newer SDKs and giving us feedback. So we really, really were happy about us working with the community, growing that developer community, getting feedback, and continuing to iterate and improve on the product.
Yeah, again, this was still due to the part that we managed to figure out what we need for each SDK, what kind of documentation we need, and what we need for a good product launch. Because customers can then see, okay, there's a lot of movement going on here. This is something interesting. Let's try to use it because it seems, like it's structured and polished. So if you want to kind of reach out to us or see what we built, we use our products or just kind of play around with the technologies that we have, you can reach out to us through GitHub. You can actually go to our organization. I think almost everything is open source. There might be like a couple of things that we're testing that they're not publicly available yet, but everything else that's currently published, that's available is open source. So you can check out each SDK, be it for like UI stuff or client-based SDKs for the backend, and make sure to leave a star so you can kind of follow everything that's going on, especially if you open issues or you open some tickets or feature requests.
Yeah, and we also have tutorials for all of these SDKs to help you get started if you need a guided path throughout your first integration. And if you're familiar, of course, we have the developer documentation that you could just dive in or ignore as you struggle to debug all night. And if you're interested about like specific features that we built, so for example, our list view that is notoriously difficult at scale with a lot of like real-time information, we publish a lot of engineering guides and opinions and use cases, etc., on our blog and our YouTube channel. So yeah, if you're a reader or a visual learner, come say hi on our YouTube channel.
And yeah, that's it from our side. We're just about on the time. So are there any questions in general about our products, about our process, or about us?
Oh, one person.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you talk about stability, and I'm interested in how you test all this functionality and what setup you have in terms of, because you need to support many devices, you want to reach these millions of users, no? And with these kinds of customizations.
Okay, yeah, so hopefully I'll get this all correctly. So in general, we have several different ways of testing our SDK. Obviously, we have the very baseline of unit testing, the business logic, making sure that everything works, and end-to-end tests that make sure that our backend gives us the information that we need, that we store it in the database, that everything is parsed correctly. But some of the new things that we've done recently are kind of exciting for us, which is snapshot testing for all of the UI components that we have. We've realized that we do manual testing, we do regressions for every single release, which usually happens on a 2-week cadence, and larger regressions when there's more changes in the SDK, like something fundamental. Yeah. But the snapshot testing is really cool because you can test all of your UI, because we are mostly shipping data to UI and rendering something. It's an easy way to run a couple of tests or 1,000 of tests in a few minutes to see if all of the UI still matches what you should be shipping to your users. Yeah. Again, this is a really big thing. If you change how something behaves differently in UI or UX, then it's not a great thing for customers. So yeah, unit tests in general, quite a baseline, I would say. We have some end-to-end integration tests as well to make sure that the backend solution works with our database and all of our code in general. We have UI tests for some of the features that we have that are very common and that are very easy to test in regression, or like in isolation, like sending messages, uploading attachments, leaving reactions. And the snapshot test side, I think, is the kind of the latest thing that we're very focused on. And it's a very quick, very easy way to check that all of our UI is consistent, that nothing changed unless you wanted to, and that it supports different things like dark mode and accessibility stuff, as well as right to left layouts. So that's something that we managed to integrate fairly simply. And yeah, I don't really have resources for that directly, but there are very cool.
Our sample apps on GitHub.
Yeah, no, like our sample apps have that integrated. So like you can just go into our directory, into our repo, and check all of that. I think we also have like a testing specific module where you can check all the things that we have.
So some of our sample apps also have integration tests. So Flutter, for example, has a driver test that goes in there and runs through some automated steps and just validates that everything works as expected. Icons appear where they need to be.
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of, it might sound weird, but we don't really have QA teams at our company, and that's because like everything that we do, we need to test ourselves. And one barrier where we want to make sure that everything is working fine is our pull requests, our reviews, and in general our releases. We're not going to approve a pull request until a full list of checklist items is done correctly. So that means if there's been UI changes, that those are correct, that things work in different kinds of scenarios like dark mode, right to left. If there's been bug fixes, that obviously the bug has been validated, but nothing else is broken. That both of the sample apps, major sample apps like Compose and XML, work if there's been a core change, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So we've added like a lot of these smaller barriers and ways to test the app, the SDK, the code that we've shipped before we actually ship it. And then obviously we have some extra regression tests at the very end. Anything else? I don't know how much time we have. No? Okay. So if you do need more input from us, if you want to reach out to us, you can use these QR codes, I guess, to scan us. We'll also share the presentation, I think, with the organizer, so you can kind of look it up. But from what I hear, there's going to be a party here as well. So if you're completely tired, there's probably going to be a DJ that's going to pick you up.
Yeah, but party.
But worst case, we're going to be here tomorrow as well. We have a booth, so you can come up to us and just we'll answer any kinds of questions you might have. And finally, you can connect with us on social media if you want to ping us directly. So thank you for listening to us, and
have a great rest of your evening.